Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this APM webinar, looking at some of the conclusions from a CBI and Turner and Townsend report looking at programs with purpose. I've got to say it's a brilliant report, a really good read with some great insights, and I think takes the profession much further on if we can act on some of the recommendations. This is a really timely webinar for us. I think that for those who've been listening to the Conservative leadership debate, it's very apparent that there are intent, at least, to deliver some really major outcome changes, and projects should be at the heart of it. This report gives us a real steer about how we can do that. So I'd just like to give you a quick outline. We're going to have 3 presentations to talk a bit about the context of the report, some of the findings and recommendations, and then what it means for the APM. But most important, we're going to have plenty of time for questions from everybody on the call today. Please put those into the chat, and I will endeavour to make sure we get through as many of those with the panel as possible. So to introduce the panelists, first we've got Dr. Josh Pritchard, who's the Deputy Director of the CBI's Policy Unit and the CBI's Public Sector Markets Lead. Now, what that means, and this is the breadth of Josh's coverage is massive, which I think is why the report has so much insight in it. He's covering infrastructure, transport, manufacturing and construction, and personally heads up policy around public procurement, major projects, defence, social value and corporate governance. So a really broad job. Josh holds a PhD from the University of Cambridge and has previously worked for the Reform think tank and Solidarity Peace Trust in South Africa and the De Beers Group. So Josh, brilliant to have you here today. Our second panellist is Gary Murphy, who's a Director for Infrastructure at Turner and Townsend, a Fellow of the APM and a Chartered Project Professional. And he's got really wide experience of projects in commercial, retail, education, transport and health in both the UK and the United States. I know Gary is also a very active APM branch volunteer and a member of the APM Corporate Advisory Group. Our third presenter is Mila Maslu. She's Deputy Chair of the APM and has got a distinguished background working in the rail industry on High Speed 1 and the Channel Tunnel Rail Link, and now with Network Rail. Mila's a keen volunteer, and congratulations, Mila. She was awarded the British Empire Medal this year for her work with the Royal Academy of Engineering on a project called COVID-19 African Rapid Entrepreneurs. So that's enough from me. Let's get on to the piece that you've really come to hear and move on to the panelists. So if I can hand over first of all to Josh, who'll talk to us a little bit about the context behind the report.
And the report really hammered home that point. I think, you know, what we were trying to do with it from the start was to pull together the huge amount of good work, of best practice, of different pieces of paper and PDFs, which demonstrate what major projects can do when done well. And we really wanted to get those into the hands of the people who make the decisions and can deliver and drive change. So predominantly, you know, we worked with the IPA, we worked with Cabinet Office and HMT on this. We had huge amount of engagement with specific delivery bodies across government, you know, from the kind of the DNS and MOD and, you know, all the way down to Network Rail and National Highways, which I keep calling Highways England despite the rebranding. So National Highways and so on. You know, we really got out there and we spoke to the people who work at the sort of the front edge of all of this. Our aim, as I say, wasn't to put more stuff into an already cluttered marketplace. You know, there is a lot of stuff out there, and I think Gary will sort of come onto this in a bit, but you know, there is a significant amount of good stuff which has already been done, and what we want to do is pull it together in something which was relatively accessible. There's a fun little slide here which shows basically everybody well, not everybody, but most people who were willing to be put in the report, who we engaged with during this process and who we kind of see as being key sort of stakeholders in this space. I think you'll note the APMs, sort of the first one your eye comes to, which is, I think, always a good sign. But, there is a huge amount of stakeholders who have a vested interest in the success of major projects at all stages of sort of, everything from design and financing through to delivery and legacy. And we really tried to pull them all together to really get in the most expert insights we possibly could. I think one thing to sort of flag at this point as well is that, and again, I think Gary will come on to this a bit more, but, the report itself is designed to be easily accessible. It's designed to be something you can pick up, flick through and really get some use out of without having to read all, I think, 90 odd pages. It was supposed to be like 25, I think, when we began, and then we realized that was an impossible task. So it ended up being a bit longer than that, but the reference guide in it, which has some sort of key reads and the key points which you should be aware of for specific policy areas, the structure we put in it, where you've got the big picture stuff broken down into categories, and then you've got the bits for success, as well. All of that hopefully makes it quite a sort of strong and relatively straightforward sort of report to get into. And finally, we wanted to base everything, absolutely everything, on evidence. So, we used case studies throughout, from our members at the CBI, from government, from external stakeholders, and we really wanted to hammer home the point that if you want to learn and see success, in the kind of delivery of major projects, then there's no better way to do it than learning from the actual tangible examples we've already seen and are seeing at the moment. So, the case studies as well, I think, provide a bit of flavour to what can otherwise be a somewhat sort of technical document. So that's the kind of I think the broad context. That's the kind of, where we sort of came from. As I say, very happy to sort of hand over to Gary, I guess, and he can go into a bit more of the detail.
Okay, thank you, Josh, and much appreciated. You said it's a 90-page document. It's actually a rip-roaring good read, so it doesn't feel like 90 pages, and it's even nicer when you can spot a few of the case studies that were success stories that you've been involved in, because it's always nice to get successes as well as the ones that struggle a bit more. So thank you for that. Just to remind everybody, if you've got questions, got comments, please put them in the chat box as we go through this, and I'll pick them up once we get a bit further through. But without further ado, Gary, over to you.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Tim. Before I do start, this is not a recording. The time behind me is not 9:20, so I need to put new batteries in the clock in the office, so apologies for that. I just wanted to build upon Josh's update and provide some more detail on the report structure, the recommendations, the 7 key themes, and then from that I'll focus on a number of just some of the recommendations, the 13 or so. I'll focus on 3 or 4 of those, where to provide a context, I think, the stuff that APM are doing and stuff that we're seeing in the market as well, and that I think also maybe to ring through to a lot of people on this kind of webinar. So the reporting structure, again, just build upon what Josh had kind of mentioned. I just want to read this quote from the report first. Programs with purpose takes a program-based perspective on the legislation, policies and guidance the projects are asked to consider. It maps these initiatives against the key themes identified by industry and government, and seeks to shine a light on best practice through highlighting case studies from the government's major project portfolio and elsewhere. So that really is, in a nutshell, just what we're trying to achieve here in the report. As Josh had mentioned, there's 170 plus publications and documents in existence over the last 10 years, good practice, legislation, etc. And this brings everything together as a kind of reference point. And interviewees as part of the report suggested that this plethora of information leads to uncertainty from clients, suppliers, as to what's the most applicable or suitable for them. So this tries to bring it all together. This also consolidates and signposts best practice, again, to clarify policy, regulation and guidance already in existence. The signpost applies to also many organisations involved in the sphere. As kind of Josh showed in the slide, there's a number of organisations, professional bodies and other trade bodies that have been producing reports on these things. Again, consolidates that as well. And again, the report provides maps, kind of relevant legislation, policies, guidance and best practice, mapping against to the kind of 7 overarching themes of the report. And on the right hand side there is you mentioned, Tim, 90 odd pages. There is a kind of a pocket guide, a reference guide to accompany the report. I had hoped to put the QR link in, but it was the limit of my kind of digital kind of expertise. And this is an aid memoir as well. Again, the signpost, again, the critique where the expertise and support can be found. So I would, if you can, try and get yourself a copy on the website of that reference guide, because it really is a good pocket guide just to bring everything together. This next slide, again, just to build upon the structure. So the programs of purpose, and there's kind of two legs or two arms of the report. There's tackling the big picture, and on the right hand side, improving project delivery. So 7 key themes from this, and they are, ensuring major projects are protecting the planet for future generations, harnessing major project spend to level up, obviously a key theme just now in the UK government. It's leveraging the UK's major projects as exportable goods, services and expertise. On the right hand side, you have getting the basics right to improve project delivery, and that's where we as APM can play a big part of that. It's driving efficiency and value across major projects to improve outcomes. It's delivering innovation and digital transformation. And last but certainly not least is skills are vital to successful delivery and lasting positive legacy. So each of these 7 themes are a chapter of the report, and each also has a reference case study, some key takeaways from the case study, and an accompanying reference guide and further reading at the end of each chapter. So that's the way the kind of construct report is. Very, very simple report to digest, and a lot of signposting to where to get to the best practice. And from those 7 themes, there have been kind of 13 key recommendations from the report. And again, I've mapped them to on this slide, just to the kind of 7 overarching themes. So it's kind of creating a project review team and plan for progression, reducing leadership turnover in major programs. It's building further capacity within the IPA. It's creating a major projects playbook. It's measuring carbon emissions consistently. It's using progressively narrow ranges for estimates. It's establishing a major project support and delivery unit, adopting early engagement forums, and using development agreements, creating a digital and data transformation charter, explicitly evaluating exportability potential, and strategically important major projects category with an IPA, and updating the balanced scorecard for growth. So I just want to kind of summarize those key themes. I just want to spend a wee bit of time just on a few of these that ring through from me, and I think hopefully for those on the call this afternoon. So the first one I want to focus on is creating a project review team and plan for progression, which essentially is as a body or forum to review lessons learned on major projects and capture the longer term impact of major projects, and that these are formally captured by the IPA, and we do share practice. In my view, and I think this is probably shared, we don't share enough positive lessons learned across major projects. And one only has to look at APM's recent list of 50 transformative projects over the last 5 decades just to realise we do not celebrate success enough. Moreover, we do focus really where projects have went wrong. So that's just really just to bring together how we can access this best practice, also access lessons learned that things have went really well, but things that haven't gone so well too. Other one I wanted to focus on again is reducing leadership churn. And obviously recognising that long-term projects and programmes span multiple years, 10, 12, 15 years. And that causes leadership churn, which causes uncertainty, loss of knowledge, change of direction, etc. on major projects and programmes. The report recommends, and this is focusing on obviously government projects, that the government explore initiatives to reduce churn among senior leaders in major projects, ideas such as greater incentives, upskilling, career plans, etc., just to make sure that churn is reduced and it provides us stability on these major projects and programs, particularly when a GMPP. The next one I want to focus on is building capacity within the IPA. And the report does recognise the significant role that IPA plays and how they are already making a significant difference, but also recommends that the remit needs extended and expanded to create further capacity to support project delivery and that knowledge share that takes place as well. Next one I want to focus on is under value and efficiency. Something that's very close to my heart is using progressively narrow ranges. So a significant challenge that we're seeing, and that is prevalent across major projects, is that really that lack of upfront realism in terms of cost, but also schedule as well. We've all seen, I'm sure, cases of where this has been overly optimistic at the outset to get stakeholder or business approval, but ultimately this is detrimental in long term, as obviously significant more funds are required to deliver the project, or we see radical cost cutting or de-scoping, which obviously undermines the original intended outcomes. So the report recommends the use of progressively narrowing ranges, from a cost and program perspective, timescale perspective, as you move through the life cycle of the project or program. And we're starting to see this has been encouraged by the Public Accounts Committee and also has been adopted as IPA guidance too. So this is something that we're seeing movement since the report was produced. And the last one that's not least, certainly not least, is measuring carbon emissions consistently. And quite rightly, we're starting to see a greater focus on sustainability in major projects and a need for major projects to be designed at the outset with climate change in mind. In the past, this is probably seen as adding cost to a project. However, there are examples in the report where to show in case studies where reducing carbon can cut project costs too, not just over the life cycle, but actually capital costs on the project. We're also seeing projects having to demonstrate their environmental costs and carbon emissions in the business case. And the report recommends to basically bring consistency across the UK. It recommends a standardised carbon calculator to enable the consistent tracking and monitoring of carbon emissions with each major project and across the full life cycle, and also each project having a net zero KPI. And since this report was produced, ourselves in Turner & Townsend, we have recently launched an innovative embodied carbon calculator tool, which is a bespoke carbon accounting tool that enables clients to evaluate the carbon footprint of projects from an early design stage right through to the handover and benefits into our transfer into benefits. And this has been, again, focused on the report or recommendation. It kind of spurs into action that we really need this. There's a gap in the market. The industry is calling for this. Major projects need this. So it's something that we have been investing in, and hopefully we'll start to see the benefit of this in the forthcoming couple of months. And that was really it. I just wanted to, in summary, I've wanted to kind of outline the kind of constructed report, basically how it consolidates best practice, how the report is constructed itself, where the terms of reference, the 7 key themes and the 13 key recommendations. And hopefully the focus, I did focus on a number of those key recommendations were particularly prevalent for myself, and I think for APM as well. Thank you, Tim.
Gary, thank you for that. To have got through so much of what's in the report in that time and make it clear, quite a triumph. I mean, I think the piece for me from this is the breadth of the opportunity that we've got to really transform project delivery, and the way that you capture that in the report is great. Gary Miller, before we move on, can I just ask you, in my introduction, I talked a bit about the changing political environment. How do you think that's affecting the kind of points that you've just been raising? And maybe I'll go to Gary first, because it's not very fair to ask Miller that one without any planning, is it?
Okay, so it's a report. I think obviously we're unprecedented. I think the report was November last year. I think we had low digit inflation at the time. Now we've got nearly double digit inflation. Mm-hmm. So I think the driving efficiency has come out of the report. I think it's the need for projects to demonstrate greater focus on driving efficiency, particularly given the kind of scrutiny on public finances just now, and we'll start to see more of that, I think, given the fiscal pressures as well. So I start to see that focus on driving efficiency on major projects, particularly in the government's major project portfolio. We're going to see that as well. I think I talked at the very end about the carbon calculator. We're starting to see since the report come out, I think it coincided with COP26, and we're starting to see more and more focus, particularly in government and industry, really on measuring carbon as well. I've seen a statistics, I think, in the report. There's only 24 of the 160 odd projects on the GMPP are actually tracking or use a standardized carbon calculator. So we're starting to see more of those happening. So that's been a kind of step change since the report. And I think also kind of leveling up and social value. You've probably seen in the leadership debates over the last few weeks a lot of discussions on that and the manifestos per se. So I can see the rise in inflation that we're seeing now will only serve to widen the social challenges, and I think there will be a greater emphasis on incoming Prime Minister and any new government to address income inequality, and also seeing greater focus on social value within tenders from the government as well. That's what I see.
Thank you, Gary. Now, slightly worryingly, Miller's just disappeared off my screen. Miller, are you still here? Yes, that's good.
Yes, I'm still here. Yeah, it's
okay. So I think you're breaking up a little bit, but you have got the best background and probably the best location of anybody on the webinar, I think, in Paris. But how do you see the changing political environment that we're in at the moment affecting some of the conclusions and recommendations in the report?
I think in my mind, projects have got a really strong capacity to do good, and hopefully you can hear me okay now. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So in my mind, I think projects have got a strong capacity to do good in the world, and so we should do everything we can to maximise projects to do that good. And when I look at some of the research that's been carried out by the APM recently, it just indicates that we still have some areas in which we should focus in order to improve the opportunity for projects to do good in the world. And there are some studies that were published in the last few years by the APM around the effectiveness of projects, as the report, which found that projects contribute about over £150 billion worth of contribution to the UK's economy, which kind of just dwarfs other industries. So it's a huge contribution to the economy, huge opportunity for us to influence that and do well in this area. And so one of the key aspects that I always think about, and the reason I'm very heavily involved with the APM, is the educational and development aspect. So I'm happy to talk a bit more about that either now, Tim, or kind of say that for when we talk about skills development and competencies and chartership and so on. But that's the area that I'm mostly focused on.
Okay. No, thank you. Let's save that and talk a bit later, because the good news is we're getting lots of questions starting to come through and in comments. So we'll and some of those will play into that. But Millie, you were going to talk to us a little bit about how this report links in with the APM and the things the APM is doing. So let me hand over to you for a few minutes.
Super. And please do shout at me if the sound is really poor. I'm doing my best from where I am. So as I was mentioning, the APM has obviously got a lot of interest in this area, and besides some of the research reports the APM has published recently, and those are available on the website, just those up, and also research which looked at 1,000 sort of project professionals and their views on the project profession, and the results of this survey showed sort of continuing shortage of skills in the project profession, which is something that I suspect most of us will have faced, but is something that certainly is reported quite widely and quite frequently. It's been reported in reports across all the professions and I've read plenty of from the National Office, and so that's why the skills aspect is so important to me, especially the being the kind of person that I am, which is just a bit of a learning geek. So just bringing that back to the APM, and for those of you who are here who may not know, the APM is the chartered body for the project profession. It's got over 35,000 members. It's an educational charity, and so there's a strong commitment within this organisation to develop and promote the value of project management to kind of deliver improved project outcomes to benefit society and essentially help projects do good in the world. And the APM does this by providing opportunities. Oh, I'm so sorry, Louise. I'm going to do my best. The APM does this to provide opportunities for development, both informal and formally. So the formal opportunities that the APM offers are qualifications and competence-based assessments, which include the chartered status, and also informal opportunities. And those are fantastically very. You can volunteer across several aspects of the organisation, and indeed you'll see that Tim and Gary and me and Josh are actually volunteering to do presentations like these. So I'd really encourage anybody with an interest in the project profession to become involved in this way. So what I'll do is, what I've said, I'll just type out into the chat just to help people who struggle to hear me a little bit, but I'll pause here just for a moment and be happy to take questions.
Thank you for that, Gary.
I'm happy to build on that slightly. I think from a skills and legacy perspective, it is I think there was back 2 years ago we had Projecting the Future in APM, and we call it a ticking time bomb. Yeah. And that report touches upon that. There is a skills gap, not just in the professional but in the trades as well, coming through, and that's going to be a massive risk to the delivery of major projects and programs. So I think what APM has been trying to do is from within the project profession is trying to reach out to make projects a first profession. I think a lot of us at my age, we're going to it's a second profession, so make it a first profession to professionalize the discipline of a project manager. And we're starting to see that coming through into a lot of outreach into schools, into HEIs as well. So hopefully we'll start to see the benefit of that. But that's just one part of that. There's a wider part of, and I think it's incumbent on all of us to really look to protect our industry and address that kind of ticking time bomb of a skills gap. And on the IPA, for example, touched on the report, the IPA has done significant work with their major leadership academy. Delighted to see they've brought a lot of the APM, they have a competency framework in place. They've brought in CHPP, so all SROs and that level of leadership have to have CHPP. So again, it's professionalizing, and that's a role the APM is playing there as well. So.
Okay, thank you for that, Gary. And as I said, great news is that we've got lots of questions starting to come in, so quite a few of which can resonate with where you've just been coming. So maybe first question, you talk in the report about improving IPA capability and capacity. How are you thinking that might happen, and would that include greater collaboration with industry?
I suppose I can answer that, and I'm very fortunate that I work with colleagues from IPA in the corporate advisory group at APM, so quite close to them, and have significant initiatives over the last number of years to, as mentioned beforehand, competency frameworks, career pathways, and also trying to professionalise the IPA and linkage with the APM. And I think there is collaboration with supply chain. I think they have been reaching out quite a bit. I think that will continue across the next couple of years, but they are doing a really, really good job. And what the report says is that the remit to be expanded a bit, and greater support being given by the Cabinet Office to the IPA is just more the same, please.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. Miller, anything you're like to add to that, because I know that APM and IPA working very closely together.
So hopefully you can hear me well now.
Yeah.
But I think it's a very of
Yeah.
just for the quality of my sound. I think from my perspective, and it might be quite boring, but I really do value professional curiosity, and it's something that about my career. And I think the APM has allowed me to explore curiosity quite comfortably, either formally or informally, through a number of different kind of opportunities, either with formal training, or membership and recognition in that way, or volunteering opportunity.
Miller, you're still breaking up quite a lot.
Everything to catch up.
Miller, you're still breaking up quite a lot. Would it help if you turned your camera off just to see? So, can you hear me, Miller? Yeah. Would it help if you turned your camera off just to reduce the bandwidth a little bit?
Done.
Yeah. There you go. Do you want to try that? Try that and see if that's any clearer.
Okay, so I've just turned the camera off. Is that clearer?
That's much clearer, much better. Yes, thank you.
Proceed.
Okay, so if I move on from that, and again, this might be a question for you initially, Miller. Some examples of reducing leadership churn. I think picking up on some of the issues that the report has highlighted. What are the initiatives and the pieces that are going on to help reduce that churn? From an APM perspective, Miller?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, Tim. The world has changed so drastically, hasn't it, really, from where we were before, and so much of the way in which work gets carried out now is so different, and a large part of that is down to the way in which COVID has reshaped the way we work and interact with each other in workplaces, and also the way in which people value their time and the value that they put on their own time. So I think quite a significant proportion of that churn has been as a result of this kind of pent up pressure that's resulted from this last couple of years, and we've certainly seen quite a lot of churn. I think things will settle somewhat, but in some ways I wonder whether churn is necessarily a bad thing, just as a concept. I know that the world has changed quite a lot since I entered the workforce, and there was a time when I first started where people would come in and sort of long service was really valued, and now it seems that frequent moves seem to be valued a lot more. So it's more of a question for me rather than a problem. I think churn is something that happens. I think it's something that's going to continue. In my perspective, as long as we've got good, well-experienced or well-trained people, I think we can handle the movement around projects relatively easily, as long as those technical skills are still available, and as long as the project profession is, prepared to react to the changing circumstances. I'll just pause there for a minute. Hopefully that came through a lot better.
You're mute, Tim.
Right.
Sorry, I missed you there, Tim.
That's all right. Let's try that one. I couldn't come off mute for some reason, so apologies. But no, I think much better, Miller. Thank you. And we've had a question that builds from that from Peter, which maybe Gary is one for you to pick up. So for those who haven't seen it, with regard to leadership turnover and seeking to reduce it, there also needs to be consideration that the type of leadership may need to evolve or change over the life of a major programme. Does the report consider this, and what are the panel's views?
The report doesn't go in. It's really about the knowledge loss of churn. I think particularly, in the civil service, there's a lot of rotations around and a lot of change of direction. So it's just and moving away from one department to the next. So you may be leading a major project and go somewhere else. So I think that's what's focused on, particularly that sector as opposed to the kind of private sector. But I like Miller's point. I like Peter's point there as well, because you do have that diversity of thought, sometimes a fresh perspective and stuff. You do need that. So churn should be encouraged, but we should be able to limit that and make sure that knowledge transfer is there and doesn't radically change objectives of the project. And what we're seeing is that particularly some of these really, really large projects and programs that span 10, 12, 15, 20 years is how to make sure that direction, that golden thread goes straight through the project, and a change of leadership doesn't really upset that. So the report doesn't really go into detail on that. It just makes recommendations how to reduce churn. But I would agree that some churn has to be welcomed.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Gary. The report majors a lot on delivering outcomes, and that tends to almost always involve transformation, of which building infrastructure is a part. What more do you think we can do to focus on the transformative outcome rather than the building or the big capital investment? And I give that to either. Miller, you were nodding a lot when I was saying that. So do you want to take that one?
Of course, and I think it's a really interesting point, isn't it? Particularly where infrastructure is concerned. A lot of people think that we just build a new thing and then sort of walk away, but of course that's not the case. And certainly when you start to look beyond infrastructure into projects that involve software, it becomes a lot more obvious that we really need to think about the way in which those final products are used. And one of the kind of great examples that was shared with me, which I was also part of my career, was the Channel Tunnel Rail Link High Speed 1, which was a project that was over budget, and at the time it was experiencing a number of challenges. But now that it is available to the population to use, to the general public to use, people really value having that. So in terms of meeting its objectives, it is now providing a valuable service. The same thing happened with the Olympics. I think there was increase in the cost of the Olympics that people were frustrated about, and there was some negative section in the media around some of the costs and so on. And yet, when they occurred, when they actually happened, the general feedback was very positive, and the general kind of benefit to the area did last for a long time beyond the initial project. Similarly, I sort of rather suspect that the same will happen with other projects. Indeed, the Great Western Main Line was built by Brunel. It was over cost for budget, lots of frustrations in the build of that particular project, and yet it is still here, a long time after that initial build, providing a valuable public service. So I think in terms of legacy, it's really important to think about how things will be used after they are built or delivered or developed, and making sure that we think about the final way in which that will provide value. So the idea that finishing on time and on budget is the only thing that a project needs to do, I think, is one that's changing now to something that says, well, even if you might finish a little bit late or a little bit over budget, or maybe early and under budget, as long as you're providing that valuable kind of legacy, that valuable benefit to your end product users, then that can be considered a project success. Hopefully that came through a lot better.
That did.
It seemed to not look confused as I was talking, so that's very good. I'll pause now.
That is fantastic. Thank you, Miller, and your point about Brunel, I think, is really well made. As one of the great heroes of Britain, I don't think he ever delivered anything on time and cost. My favourite one's the SS Great Britain. what an amazing achievement, only 20 years late, with a completely different design, broke every rule in the book, but look what they do and achieve. And I think with Crossrail, when the question was asked around it, you know, it was will Crossrail be a success? Well, we'll know in 70 years time. You know, wow, there's some really long time scales for us to think about if we are thinking about delivering a real changed outcome. And I thought that the report was very interesting in the emphasis it placed on that outcome was the environmental, the levelling up, the sustainability, the exportability pieces and things with it. But Gary, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I suppose it's dropping down a wee bit level, but the report does talk about outcomes as well. Is that as a profession, as an industry, we need to go away from specifying things at the outset. It's become more outcome focused. What is outcome of that project, and also bringing the supply chain in at an early stage to help with those outcomes instead of like too late giving them something that's already designed and specified and limited ability to add value. I think one of the case studies report was Anglian Water, the One Anglian Alliance, again, where they brought the alliance to solve these problems and challenges and have a very much an outcome focused. And I think that's a model that we should probably see more of, you know, and a focus on outcomes.
Fantastic. Thank you, Gary. So we've got time for a couple more questions with it, and picking up, I'm going to weave together a number of the comments that have come in, and actually it would be great to get comments from everybody on the webinar coming in on some of this and your ideas for it. So we've seen lots of recent publications around project delivery, about how we get it right, and this is a great report. What are we going to do to make sure it actually lands and embeds?
I suppose it's things like these, you know, sessions with the professional bodies, and it's getting the report out and you know, so people are aware of it. And you know, some colleagues of mine and Josh have been with the Major Project Association, the IC and stuff. So it's getting expanded the reach of the report, you know, so that will be a success as a whole. But again, the report, there's nothing extremely radical in the report. It just brings everything together as a, you know, so I've got mine here beside me. It's beside me on my desk, and if I need to find something, it's a really good reference, really good compendium library for that. That's the success, is for people, you know, using it and coming back. But this is evolving. You know, this is talking about what has changed since the report. This report will evolve. I know the CBI will want to continue on this journey as well, and reflect back on what has changed and what we need to evolve. So yeah, this is very much the first part of the journey.
Fantastic. And it looks like, I think Josh, we lost you for parts of this, but it looks like you're now back with us, which is great for us. So is there anything you'd like to add in at this point? Or maybe he's not.
No, he's just Josh did a text in the chat box.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So okay. So if that's where we are, then. So Miller, what about you? How do we actually make this embed and drive the change?
Well, whenever I sort of get asked this kind of question, I always think about what I'm going to do, to be honest, Tim. So I think that's what I would leave people with as a thought.
Yeah.
If there's something that you read in this report which really appeals to you and you think should be tackled, then I would really encourage you to just do that, find a way of doing that. And the Association for Project Management is very supportive of any ways of improving the project profession, developing, you know, better mechanisms, better systems, better approaches for people to deliver on projects well. So that's where I kind of stand. Exercise that professional curiosity, look at the things that you can do to influence the outcomes of the projects that you're working on to improve them. And if you feel that there is an association out there, maybe the APM, maybe another one that could or should do better, well, go and tell them, and then go and be part of that change. and help drive it forward. I think the APM is extremely open to doing anything that supports project profession, delivering projects better, doing more good in the world. So there'll always be an openness there. So it's an open invitation really for anybody who's in this room or sees this webinar or reads this report and thinks, well, I can do that, or I can do better than that.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what it takes to really change things going forward.
Miller, that's a brilliant call to arms to user. So we've probably got time. There's a couple more questions. Gary, there's quite a specific one about the process for being considered for the project review teams and how to be involved in the plan.
So is it, presumably this is for the IPA's project review teams?
Yes.
If that's the case, I think it's quite it's quite the IPA's website outlines of kind of process for that, because it is as an independent assessor for major projects and stuff. So I wouldn't have the link offhand, but I've certainly seen it on the IPA's website to become an assessor.
Brilliant, and I think it's there on gov.uk.
Yes,
isn't it? So that will work. So I'm just aware, for 4 minutes. Gary, Miller, what was the most surprising thing in the report for you?
I don't think anything surprising in the report. I think I consolidated.
I've got something I can sort of. Oh. Sorry, go on, Gary.
I don't think anything really groundbreakingly surprising. That just kind of consolidates a lot of the best practice kind of out there. But I suppose the top takeaways from me really, I suppose been surprising, really is the skills gap. It's not going to go away. It's continuous, getting worse and worse. So how do we address that? And as a profession, as an industry, how do we and collectively all address that? It's also that carbon angle as well. I didn't really appreciate that we didn't have a kind of consistent tool to measure this, that only a kind of handful of projects in GMPP were measuring carbon. And that's I was surprised of that, to be honest. I thought there'd be more. I think as an industry and profession, we need to up our game in that respect, because we do contribute a lot to carbon, major projects in the construction and in the life cycle of that. So we need to up our game in that respect. And I would welcome the government having a standardized approach to how we manage carbon. I only see this getting more and more focus on this. So we have an opportunity to do it now.
That's a great and really specific action to take on. Miller, you've already got people volunteering in the chat to help you land some of this, which is great. But your thoughts on what the surprises were?
Yes, I suppose same as it is a skills gap continues to have heard about this ever since I entered the workforce. So I've been hearing about the skills gap for. Still an issue is a bit of a surprise. So again, maybe I can come back to my sort of rally call and just put forward some ideas about how we can start to tackle some of this. I think there are ways in which we can start to make a little bit of a difference and start to share some of our knowledge with others. And I really believe in and carry out quite a lot of mentoring activity, and I value that very much. Another thing that I've done lately, which has been so rewarding, and I think anybody in almost any organisation can do, is either schools or universities, and I think that is an absolutely fantastic thing to do, a fantastic way of sharing technical experience and then linking in with schools and universities, so that the kind of academic angle can be tapped into the practitioner's angle. And some of the projects that I've heard about that people are running in conjunction with schools, colleges and universities are absolutely groundbreaking. So I would say if there's ever a piece of research or a project that you want to run in your organisation and you really want.
Miller, I think we've lost it.
Universities and use that knowledge, I think would be really valuable.
All right, thank you, Miller, and that's a really good and positive point to end on for today. I'd just like to thank all of our panelists, Gary, Miller, Josh. I'd like to thank everybody who's joined in. These things can become very, very dire if people don't contribute and join in the conversation. And just looking at the chat as it's been going through, we've had some really great engagement. I know a lot of these pieces and things like the projecting the future work, the APM is actively taking forward now, so there are opportunities to engage in all of this from an APM perspective as well as within your own organisations. So can I also just thank the APM for putting this on and sorting it out, and for all of you for staying to the end. I think we kept virtually everybody, which is brilliant and almost unheard of. So have a great afternoon, everybody. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.